Welcome to this session, actually to this segment, to conclude this morning's program. And it did start so nicely with our inaugural. And I think that was very much shaped by questions from the audience, such as Leonardo's, regarding what else we were doing concretely to leverage innovation technology and help close the diversity and not just gender gaps, but also those involving people with disabilities, Afro-descendants, and LGBTQ. So we have the perfect person here with us, who we shall now introduce to dive deeply into that with truly an amazing wealth of experience. And Tainara is going to share with us information on the program in Brazil. And I think this is something that can be replicated, and it applies to everyone. I would like to give you a little bit more context beforehand, as the focus of our work, as previewed by our president, Ilan Goldfein, this morning. The focus is increasingly on effectiveness and impact, and on closing the most profound gaps in our region, one of them being the inequality gap, not just as regards all of the groups we mentioned, but as we all know, on the way out of the pandemic, of course, the blow was harder for our groups and for youth in general, not just women. We have 30 million young people in our region who have no opportunities for work, who are not studying either. And with such innovative solutions as the ones Tainara will talk about, dealing with programs to build the skills of the future through new platforms and new methods for education and employability, we can't continue to have so many millions of young people not working or studying. So we are here to close that gap. Of course, the training requires a whole process to drive the most innovative companies in the region. And there's the role of venture capital and startups and organizations across the region. For this, venture capital still has plenty of room for growth. It peaked at $5 billion in investments in the region a few years ago, and then it went down, and it has to continue to increase, not just to pick up where it left off, but it needs to increase to levels close to similar levels to those in other emerging regions. That's the sort of work we look forward to with programs such as Reprograma, and I would specifically like to focus on some of the impacts we're already getting to see. When we marry these things, venture capital with a focus on highly innovative businesses, which also deliberately take action to have greater participation by groups that have traditionally been underrepresented. As for women, there are statistics, and we know that just a 10% increase in the hiring of women as partners of a venture capital fund could increase 1.5% the return of those funds. Women invest founders actually generate twice the amount of their male counterparts, and Afro-descendants also ended up with a 30% increase relative to others and going to the stock exchange. So this is also an economic engine. It's not just about equality per se. And we know this is not solved only through investment and financing. For those of you here in the entrepreneurial and venture capital community, it is important to note that we're here to talk and create opportunities for investment, and we have invested in a whole lot of investment funds in venture capital and in over 800 high-growth businesses in the region. And also, to close this gap, we have engaged in a program on diversity in venture capital so as to provide support with a first set of 5 funds as part of a program to ensure that there are more partners in terms of management and the businesses themselves, also working on programs to hire digital talent. And we will delve deeper into that. So, that said, in terms of the challenges and opportunities and the tools we have as IDB Group, and of course with all the others, some of which are represented here. Tainara, one first question, starting of course, by asking you to briefly tell the participants what Reprograma is about. After that, could you tell us what sorts of actions we may undertake, considering that according to the Global Gender Gap Report of the World Economic Fund for 2023, at the current pace of progress, it'll take us 131 years to achieve full equality. So you and I, at that pace, will probably and obviously not be around to see that. How can we work together to see that equality in our own lives? And tell us, please, about Reprograma and the focus. It's sad, 131 years, and we won't be around. But we are starting to work in order to ensure that at least the gaps will not be that huge. And our initiative teaches coding to women in Brazil and also raises awareness among young girls and women for them to pursue careers and training in technology. And as to what we can do before the 131 years, when we think about the future of society in general, we are looking at a society that will be fully turning to technology as a focus. And so we need to think about where we stand today so that the young girls and women get there with opportunities, and with opportunities in that future we envisage. So what we can also do now is work on that, because that is the job market of the world. Many positions will be related to technology, and we need for women to get there being already prepared to hold those kinds of positions. Very good. Tell us a bit more. With us here is the CIO of the IDB Group, and we've had experiences involving other programs before Reprograma, programs that were focusing on the gender gap and also on the digital skills of women. As said this morning, we want to walk the talk, and thanks to the human resources and technology groups of the IDB, we have also had women from those programs actually being involved in the workforce of the IDB, and they have helped us achieve a digital transformation. So, under Reprograma, what are the skills you see emerging in the people who go through that, and why do you think it is all important to have an early entry? Today, one major topic is artificial intelligence, and there are other topics. More and more people are getting into data issues. Cybersecurity is very powerful. We also have a whole lot of other organizations that may take this view, seeking to connect the market to what we are doing today. also connecting to organizations that help us move forward, such as the IDB, where there has been a digital transformation. The IDB being the organization that is sort of investing in organization. So how can we connect the sorts of things we're doing here to the whole ecosystem that is working in the same direction? But going back to what we see for the future, we have some core topics that are very important. We don't have that many people to work on those topics right now. So we need to look ahead and train those who are around today to be able to fill those positions. And of course, we need to start increasingly early, because we are talking about girls studying today. And there's this sort of stigma that technology, science, and maths are not subjects for girls. But of course, this is not the case. I mean, there's no empirical data for this. And these young girls will become women in the future. How will they get there? And what are the positions they will be holding? So we want to work on connecting the market and civil society so as to bring to the market skilled people who will be able to rise to the occasion and take up those positions in the future. So it's about transforming and updating skills so as to stay abreast of something that is changing so rapidly, right? And it's about starting to do this increasingly early. Let's sort of double click on that. In terms of these skills, how does Reprograma work in order to be able to keep up with the skills? And when you talk about starting increasingly early, what does that mean in terms of the sorts of alliances or partnerships you need in order to pave the way, including work with universities so that they may also help you stay updated while at the same time going along the whole path from childhood to higher education? Can you tell us more about that journey and what are the priorities as regards to skills and how do you stay updated? It should be noted that after many tests and trials, Reprograma has realized that it's not just about focusing on the education of women, but it's about helping them get into the job market. Because if you have a woman with a nice piece of paper, a diploma, and they don't get a job, then the mission is not accomplished. And we then need to see how the woman or the women in general will be staying on in those positions. Because when you look at the listings, you will see that there is a high degree of diversity groups, women and other minority groups that are left aside. How do we change the mindset in order for the market to really take these groups on board and for them to be able to pursue careers in these areas? So we teach skills, but it's also about ensuring that they're employed and that they can hold down those jobs. And if we look back, there's also a need for the girls to be prepared and trained, because the work we do with women today is harder because there's been a whole life of suggesting that women are not cut out for technology-related careers. And we also need to prepare the market and connect to the ecosystem. What are we doing with organizations and companies? We need to look at the market and see what they need in terms of skills. So we are talking as well to companies that support us with our projects. So there has to be ongoing communication among all of the actors involved in this process, so that we, either at Reprograma or other organizations, in particular in this field, we want to make sure that we train people who can join the market, but we also need to achieve the ultimate objective, which is to bridge the gender gap and make sure that these people can fill the positions. Right, and by way of reference, what we're getting to see is that the gap is being closed as regards training and access for women and other diversity groups to these future skills, not just about coding anymore, but also in terms of skills that can be used in real life. Of course, AI is everywhere. And of course, there's blockchain and so many other developments that require sophistication in programs. So that is being dealt with. But Tainara, when it comes to employability, there's still a bit of a shortcoming, right? Non-STEM jobs have only 43% of women in the region, and when you look at STEM-related jobs or careers, it's less than 30%. So to illustrate your points and the actions you're undertaking to collaborate with businesses to have better connections and ensure employability or high employability, including the companies that are seeking this kind of talent. So how can this be done beyond Brazil? How can you extend this to the rest of the region? And how can this be coupled with other programs, either on the government or private sector side? Well, the data are very important because today we have about half non-STEM jobs with women. And in the future, the idea is for these STEM jobs to be more than non-STEM jobs. So if that is the case, where will these women be left in the future? Where do we want them to be in the future? So that's what we need to work on to make sure that in 100 years' time, things will be better. But when we look at the links to companies, I think it starts with a word that is education. Today, we have a culture in Latin America, and here we have a large group of women, though we're not in the majority. We here express a job market that pushes us out. We can't be mothers. We can't have our specifically female or women-related features because that doesn't tie in with the market or its requirements. And that has to do with a culture, which takes a long time to change. But you need to start somewhere. So under Reprograma, and this is an idea we can share with other organizations too, so as to start talking to the companies, and we offer training in diversity, inclusion, and equity. And this is 1-to-1, because when you place a transsexual woman in an environment that is all male and cis male, and it's always been that way, those men need to understand how to relate to these people as well. So it's not just about putting the woman there. It's about creating an environment that will allow them to stay on. And there are companies that have reached out to these women, and we started to work and learn and, find ways for these companies to accommodate these people. And of course, the idea is for them to be able to stay on and not to leave after 2 or 3 years. When we worked on the data on STEM graduate women and women who go into STEM jobs after graduating, a large number of the women don't stay on for more than a year. So what's going on then? So we are getting the education right, as Irene said, but we're not achieving the ultimate goal, which is to ensure the true, real presence of women, not just as part of building a society with an economy that accommodates women, but also it's about building technology for the future, because we do believe that women are not participating in the construction of what we are going to build, and that's very important.
Un poco viendo.
Tell us a specific story. Tell us about changes and perhaps share a case with the audience. Also, in the case of Reprograma, because there are a lot of initiatives like this one throughout the region, but in the case of Reprograma, right from the start, right when Reprograma was being designed, you have worked with Afro-descendants, you have worked with the LGBTIQ plus population in Brazil and elsewhere. You have worked with populations that aren't necessarily in the lens of most initiatives. So could you share some stories with us? Tell us about other dimensions of diversity, other groups that we haven't mentioned. Yes, more than half of the women are Afro-descendants, and more than 20% of the women are transsexual. And that is difficult because, as you were saying, we're not seeing organizations that are all that focused. So we don't know how to do this. We don't know what the barriers are that are faced by these women. So we're learning by doing. But yes, we are very focused on those women who are not only experiencing a gender gap, but a deeper gender gap for those persons that are on the margin. In Brazil, that is the reality of all of Latin America too. So the initial idea of Reprograma, as you were saying, Irene, is to focus on these groups because these are groups that are basically outside of what is happening globally. Now, in terms of stories, things that have happened to us is, well, a couple of things. First of all, we in the Reprograma, all of us, we're all women. And that is an example that we want to set for companies. So we work well. What we're doing is possible. And we're also reflecting what we believe in. So we are women. Sometimes we are cisgender or transsexual, and we work on all dimensions. We work on teaching, we do administrative functions, and that is because we want to inspire the women who are studying under us, so that they can take a job thinking that that is possible. Now, in women that are transsexual, I said that more than 10% of them are transsexual. And that is a very long road. And we need to adapt many things so as to be able to include these women. For example, in terms of registering for training, we have to eliminate the part of the video that has to be recorded because many of them suffer from dysphoria. Also in Brazil, data shows that only 4% of transsexual persons are formally employed. So this isn't something that we see in the job market. It's not easy to find. In other words, we're not finding these people every day of the week. So we have to leave behind our personal experience leading a privileged life to step into reality, seeing how can we include these people. And that reality is including women in the world of technology. So the truth is we have many women who talk to us when we're giving our boot camps. That is an 18 or 12-week training session, and there we focus entirely on technology. And many of these women say, this is a change of life. It's not just changing my economic possibilities. It is a complete change. They are in a place where they feel welcome. They feel that they are even loved because the market often pushes them aside. And this is a space where they are being shown opportunities. We tell them, you can join this market, you could participate in this market. So that too reflects how these people feel after they have taken training, after they have joined the marketplace. They are better able to deal with pressures. They find a space in society that has less stigma. So we always have to be there, necessarily. Sometimes the situation may be hostile, but we have to be there and we get used to it. There can only be a change in culture if we are there. Thank you, Tainara. I think that makes it very clear. And this morning, too, Ilan was talking about the Olintec program. So that begins with different neglected groups. But the truth is, reality is different in each country. Now, in countries, young people, men too, they experience gaps too. So in the long run, it is a matter of applying the same approach, but it can touch on different realities in all countries. And that means that this all-in tech, with its comprehensive approach, can be successful because many groups are often excluded. And we do have some circulating mics if people have comments or questions to make. So we're very open, very welcoming to comments. So if you could help us pass the microphone, that would be great. Also, Tatiana is here. She heads the Amazonia initiative. And also, we have representatives of the indigenous communities that we're working with. Our projects are very well underway in technology, for example, working with different assets, because we have to design these projects with our local counterparts. And we need those counterparts to have technical capabilities. So I see a raised hand. Amazonia, do you have any participants from the Amazon? That's an important question because in Brazil, and I don't know if there are a lot of Brazilians here in the audience, but in Brazil, we do have a social division that follows the different territories. So we have the southeast and the southern regions, and there most of the economic power of Brazil is to be found. So in the north and the northeast, their levels of poverty, lack of access are high. So in our program, we try to de-Sao Paulo-ize. In other words, we try to get rid of the idea that jobs are only to be found in Sao Paulo. We try to move those jobs to other parts of Brazil, especially to the north, where we have the Amazon and the states that are part of the Amazon basin. And also, we try to get jobs in the northeastern part of the country. Why? Because technology is not just for a select group of people. As was said earlier today when we were talking about the Amazon, technology has to be available to everyone. And there are some things that are very straightforward, protecting our jungle, for example, other things. And so that's why I'm saying we have to involve these people in the technological building process, because social needs have to be detected at their root, because I, as an outsider, don't know where these problems come from. So how am I going to design technology for these people so they can find their own solution, something that is going to work in their region, in their territory? So that is why this idea is so brilliant. Recently, or earlier on, we had an example of how to protect the forest. if we also encourage technological development in the region. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to turn to some questions. Please go ahead. You here. Yes, over here. Hello. This question is for Tainara Caldas. My name is Eusebio from Dominican Republic, and I am from Life Transformer, and we work with the disabled community. My question is, Reprograma, are you doing anything with the disabled? You talked about diversity. I didn't hear any mention of disability. Do you have any experience working with the disabled? Thank you for that question. What was your name again? Could you repeat? Giselia Eusebio. In Reprograma, we have a specific area for diversity and inclusion, and we focus on these two groups. These are Afro-descendant women and transsexual women. But when we get into our policies at a deeper level, we're also giving priority to persons with disabilities, single mothers, and other members of the LGBTIQ plus community. And we also have a policy, and that is that we give scholarships to these people because we know that there is intersectionality too. But there are some situations where it is hard for these people to be able to go to class. In our case, it's for 18 weeks. So we have to find other ways of supporting these people in the organization. So if we have people from this group during the selection process, in our selection process, there are many people that apply, and it's hard for us to choose who gets admitted. But we always take the people in these groups first, and then we adapt according to the person's disability. So often we have to do adaptations in keeping with the person's needs. So that is the idea. But we don't have a person that does sign language. If we have a person that is visually challenged, we will find a way of accommodating that person's needs. Or if a person can't see the computer, we help them. So we have to help these people by taking the students' needs into account. These people know what problems they have, and all of this allows us to provide training to these individuals. Thank you very much for that answer. We in the IDB group, we see the disabled as one of the 4 priority groups under our diversity approach. And we see the need to support initiatives like Programa with other programs. Like, for example, here in the Dominican Republic, we have a Grupo Once, so as to create the conditions so that groups can make these reasonable adjustments in the way they hire or in physical accommodations if necessary. So those interested in that approach for disability, our colleague Juan Pablo Hirocos is here with us, and please do follow up with him. Also, Ismelde is here. So it would be great if we could scale up these programs across the region. Here we have another question.
Hola, Irene, Tainara.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Tainara. I was pleased to hear what you were saying about cultural practices and diversity, equity, and inclusion. These two things have to work together. I don't have data for the Caribbean or Latin America, but I can talk about Mexico. In the case of Mexico, this type of project should be measured so as to be able to quantify the impact on GDP. Now, in looking at stakeholders in Mexico, even with the advisory committee of who may be the new president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, I was telling them that they should measure using the cultural satellite account. And I think that that is something called for by UNESCO. It's an initiative that goes back some 10 years. And I'll tell you why we have to measure, because these are printed books, these are performing arts, things that have digital content, activities of cultural dissemination. And these indicators were down minus 7% in terms of the GDP. So my consideration is if governments cannot measure diversity using technology, they should do that through the current account as proposed by UNESCO. And my question for you, Tainara, is in Brazil, what do you do in terms of public policy to facilitate funding? Because often that involves a lot of red tape. And Irene, what are the facilities in IDB Lab to provide legal counsel and perhaps to be able to find a way of funding civil society? Thank you. And your name? Eric Gonzalez. Eric, well, thank you. This whole matter of public policy is a very important one because we talk about companies and the IDB, et cetera. But if we're going to talk numbers for the program, these are very good numbers, but they're not enough. And the problem is a big one. When you talked about Mexico, and the same thing can be found in Brazil, we have to be involved in public policy making. And unfortunately, that changes a lot because administrations change. And this type of change is often a structural change and is long term. But you're right. In the case of Brazil, we're seeing how we can connect to the ministries that have an impact on our area of work. That's technology, employment, diversity, so that we can see, first of all, what we already have, because creating this takes years and years, but what we already have to support what we're already doing. That could be federal, local policies. In the case of Brazil, it's also states and municipal policy. So these entities can provide not only money, but also act as a network. When we talk about public schools, that is a way of reaching a lot of girls that are in these groups, and they cannot go to the major universities. So we need to work closely with the government. This is a major topic, of course, but we have to work with the policies already on the books so as to make good use of them and to help build the future of public policy that will reflect what civil society is already doing. Civil society can inform what is happening on the ground so the government can hear from civil society and in that way project what is being done across the entire country. So our idea is to take that first step and to think that in the future we need to dovetail with public policy so that we can make good use of what we have already done. And we can work with the technical people that are working in the areas of concern to us. Now, also in view of the institutional strategy of the IDB group, and that strategy is going to be presented to the governors here at this meeting, one of the aspects of the strategy is to encourage synergies between the public arm, the private arm, which is IDB Invest, of the IDB group. And in this specific case, we have the leader, Fernando Regalia, of the social sector. And in IDB Lab, we are like a testing ground. We are an observatory for these new approaches. We have programs that the public sector may not yet be able to try, but we can see whether or not there is a deep-rooted impact. What happens with diversity? what happens with the employability, with the income level of these people? And then with public policies, can we put into place mechanisms to finance projects like this or to support them? In the case of Brazil, also working with a program for the ECTEC Foundation with the Lehman Foundation's backing. We are coordinating all of this so as to have a lasting impact. Now, the concrete question that you asked me, you said, how from IDB Lab can we support aspects having to do with corporate governance? Beyond classic corporate governance, that depends on the degree of readiness of the operations we finance. We finance projects between 150,000 to 5 million. We make small investments in startups. Often companies aren't ready for larger operations, but we work on things starting with design for entrepreneurial undertakings. For example, in the digital programming area, there has to be a component of corporate management. Used to, that didn't exist. It was only social or environmental considerations. So now we have to take into account governance too. We don't want to have bad effects because of biased data or because the recommendations have been out of line. But what we have now is tools, and this is a program called LAC, LAC, and those programs are open source. So if you founded a company, if you're an investor, you can use these tools to find support. It is a type of support, and then we have more hands-on programs, like I mentioned initially when I talked about diversity with Diversity DC, where we are more involved in training to generate more diverse teams. And these efforts plant the seeds of future entrepreneurship.
Atrás. No quiero. Tenemos un.
So I think that we have a proximity bias. I keep recognizing people in the front rows. Quick questions, and I would say to both of you, my name is Cristina Puch, and I come from Spain. Now, Reprograma, the women, your program, you take them from one point, but my question goes way back. What happens to those boys or girls, these young people that do not reach that point? Often it's not that, well, they think that they cannot benefit from a STEM program. Often they do not have the reading, the mathematic capabilities to reach that level. So my question is, are you looking at that population, the population that's not ready to receive the training? And Irene, perhaps when you talk about ELITEC, you may talk about that, but does the IDB have a program? Does it have an investment facility for this type of solution? Something that goes way back. If we want these boys and girls to be able to be in a position to go to a boot camp that could change their lives, what happens if they drop out of school after grade 6? Thank you, Cristina. We only have 2 minutes left, so if you have questions, we can stay behind after we adjourn. But yes, it's important to think about that, because the truth is many of these young people will not reach the level where training can be provided, and that's why we said it was 100 and some years, but we would have to wait. But often when people reach our programs, they don't have the basics. So we're trying to incorporate other things along the way to make certain that these women will be there so that we will not neglect them. Because if we begin with girls today, they will be fine in the future. But there are other gaps, and we would need 5 hours to talk about these gaps. They're regional, there are gaps in funding, there are problems with the schools. Some girls in our programs had to borrow a computer, and then they would have to go somewhere where they could get a signal to connect. So this is a major challenge, and we are trying to have influence on the parts that we can correct. Very quickly, obviously, from the public side, we have social programs focusing on those early stages. We at IDB Lab can't spread ourselves too thin. We would like to scale up so as to have greater impact. So we are focused on the programs I just described, but we realize that there is a lot that we're not addressing.
Minute left to say thank you to all of you. Gracias. Muchas gracias.
So thank you. I wanted to thank Flavio Emiliano. I thank the organizers of this event. Thank you.